Welcome to the Next Level Casino Careers Show, a series highlighting industry tips and insights from the best minds in the casino and hospitality industry. Enjoy the show.
Hey, good morning, Tommy.
Good morning, Brandon. Great to be here. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for joining us today here at Next Level Careers, sponsored by Yamava Resort and Casino. Real quick for our audience, before we get started, I just want to do a couple introductions. I'll introduce myself a little bit, introduce you, and then we'll just kind of go from there. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Great. So real quick, my name is Brandon Jones. I'm the Vice President for the Department of Public Safety here at Yamava Resort and Casino. I've been here now for, it'll be 6 years in January. I've been in the hospitality and gaming industry for just a little over 14 years. Prior to that, I was in the United States Air Force, and I was stationed over at Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is really how I ended up in the hospitality and gaming industry. Now, when it comes to you, Tommy, I know you from being my entrepreneurship professor at USC Marshall School of Business, going through the MBV program. You've had an amazing career. You've had many, many personal accomplishments, and you've given back to so many organizations and so many people. And you have such a big impact on individuals, which I can vouch for firsthand. I'm one of those. You've done a lot, and it's an honor to have you on the show. So, could you give us just a little bit more of an introduction about you?
Hey, Brandon, thanks. And thanks for having me. It's great to be here because I'm going to take a little different approach. My background certainly is very varied and really much more as an entrepreneur. But I grew up in Southern California. I spent my summers, very fortunately, right up the hill from everyone there at the casino at Lake Arrowhead, and became very involved in the water skiing and enjoying the summer up in the mountains. Became a national championship water skier from doing that. But I was that kid that always was looking at things and always trying to find opportunities and starting businesses. So when I went to USC as an undergraduate, right afterwards, I started a company called Club Sportswear. And Club Sportswear was really focused on the beach volleyball industry. This was back in 1984, 1985. And had a lot of success growing that business. Also grew another business around surf shops in Hawaii that I started called Honolua Surf Company. It's been around now in Hawaii for over 26 years, was bought by Billabong. And then later I came into teaching as kind of an afterthought. So a lot of times professors at universities, that's their career path. It wasn't my career path. In fact, I didn't start until 2008, but I've been at USC Marshall right down in downtown Los Angeles since 2008. So about 14 years teaching, and I've been able to teach at all levels, undergraduate, graduate like yourself, Brandon, and then also some PhD folks. And so my career has had a really varied path, but always focused, believe it or not, with an entrepreneurial mindset, which we'll talk about today as well.
That's great, Tommy. Thank you for that. And let me ask you. So, was it always entrepreneurial for you?
Always. I don't know, and that's one of the interesting things. I want to be careful. My story was, but I have a lot of successful friends who came into entrepreneurship later. And so it's not one of those things, you have to be born an entrepreneur. And I know that sometimes gets confusing, but my path was that path. My path was, I was that curious kid asking questions, figuring out, boy, could you do it differently and things like that. But that's a path, but not the only path. In fact, probably not the most common path.
Right. So what's kept you on that path for so long?
I that's a great question. And it's one of those things that I think just kind of gets at you inside. I think it's that thought of how can I, why is it being done this way? How could it be done better? Why aren't other people doing it? So it's looking at things, I think, in that different way. And so just always been motivated. And then luckily, and you mentioned a little bit, the other thing that I've really put into play in my own career is how can I bring others along with me? How can I help others along? So teaching is obviously a big part of that. And also being involved in some different nonprofits and things like that. Because as you get to a point where you've had some success in entrepreneurship, and thankfully I have, you go, well, hey, I'd like more people to have success here with me as well.
Right. And so is that one of the areas that got you into teaching? Was really being able to deliver that to other people?
It really was realizing that, boy, I had, by that point, by coming to USC, I'd probably had 4 or 5 successful different ventures, and saying, okay, what's the next step? And for me, I saw the next step as that opportunity. How can I make an impact with some others? And I was very fortunate. I'd been a guest lecturer for a lot of years at USC, so I had already had the connection. And then a teacher, Kathy Allen, one of my professors, had kind of said, hey, you want to come co-teach a class with me? And so I got my feet wet a little bit with that, and then I just got hooked. And then it was just, boy, this is fun. And then watching students and folks look at opportunities and look at ways that they could grow their business, and have had some students who've had phenomenal success that I've been able to watch. I certainly take no credit, but been able to watch them have.
Yeah, you definitely bring a different perspective to people, both from an entrepreneur standpoint and really an entrepreneur standpoint, and kind of how that can really intermingle, or how you can work with those. And we'll touch on that here in just a little bit. But, as you've gone forward in your career, there's always seems to be peaks and valleys, right? There's a lot of really good times and really bad times. What keeps you motivated?
Well, I think first of all, Brandon, you talk about a really good point, which is understanding that it is peaks and valleys, that it isn't that road doesn't stay on a high and it doesn't stay on a low, that road does swerve and change and adjust. And so I think one of the things is to enjoy the journey, So not saying, because a lot of times you get to that finish line and you're like, wow, that wasn't quite what I thought it was. And so you continue down that journey. So I think number one is making sure you realize it is part of the journey. Number two is this isn't going to last forever, and then it's the challenge of how do I look at the glass half full? How do I see the opportunity to get through this? One of the things with COVID, obviously, which was a major, crisis for the country and people, but you see those entrepreneurs who were able to actually find opportunity in that. And whether it were folks early on with the PPD, with the personal protection stuff and things like, masks and things like that, to later on folks doing different things with food delivery, or, all sorts of things. I mean, the hospitality industry struggled early on with COVID, and then just, you could see the demand just grow from there. And so folks finding that opportunity that came with that.
So let me ask you, when, as you've been going through your career and the different paths that you've taken and that you've been on, when you're at your highs, what do you do to maintain that level?
Yeah, that's a great, wow. I didn't realize we were going this tough on these questions, Brad. I'm just kidding. No, that's a great question. I think it's when you're kind of clicking, like you said, you're clicking and things are feeling good. You have to maybe stop and take the time and say, okay, what am I doing that's really allowing me to be at my best here? How am I, personally, am I sleeping better at night? Am I waking up better? What am I doing? Am I eating better? What are those little things that I need to take care of? How are my personal relationships? Am I taking care of my family? Am I taking care of, whatever my belief system is, and things like that? So I think when all of it has to jive for you really to be your best when you're doing other things, and especially in hospitality, because hospitality is so focused on helping others, that's what it's that service mindset, but I think when you do that throughout your career, you find that that's the real opportunity.
Nice. Yeah, I know we've talked about that a little bit before, and we called it the flow state, right? You're in that state of mind, or you're in that environment to where everything's just clicking and moving. So from what you said is really, it's reflection. Look back on what you're doing and really know and take advantage of those points that are helping you move along your path.
Right. And everyone's are going to be different. Everyone has their own set of points that work for them and things like that. And then also understanding when that thing comes up that throws you off a little bit, saying, hey, hold on, I don't need to have that drag me down. How can I take what I'm doing and actually make that be a positive?
And that's a perfect lead way, because I was going to go to my next point is, okay, so when we're in the lows, right, how do you get out of that funk, so to speak?
Again, get back to your foundation, right? Get back to those things that you do well. And we all, trust me, we all fall off the cart. Don't get me wrong. We all have those situations. Maybe we've, been goofing around too much, eating too much, whatever it may be. Yeah. How do I get back to those levels that really allow me to focus, and then realize because looking, like you said, looking back at your history, looking back and saying, hey, I've had these bumps in the roads before. How have I been able to work through this? What has worked best for me? And then it's that strong belief system. I think you have to have a strong belief in yourself, a strong belief that, you've got a team that's going to work with you, that are there for help, and then just, doing the work to make it happen.
No, fair enough. Thank you for that. We talk a lot about, kind of where we've been, what we've done to get to where we're currently at. But let's talk just a tad bit about the future. What gets you excited about the future, Tommy?
Well, one of the great things being involved in education and at a university is you see these crazy bright minds. And there are some folks, and Brandon, you see it even in our class, where there's folks just thinking and doing and things like that. So I tend to think that there's a great opportunity ahead for the future, that we're going to see, technology still being in place. We're going to still see opportunities that, for new inventions and new things to do things. So I feel really good about where we're going. Certainly there's some stuff you can, jump on that says, boy, maybe things aren't running the way they should, or this isn't as good. And there's always that the good old times are always the best. Well, believe it or not, today are the good old times. And you know what? Tomorrow's going to be even better good old times ahead. So I see a lot of good opportunities ahead. I think as you look at trends and economic trends, I think what COVID did for hospitality is remind everyone how important it is to spend time with friends and families, and how important it is to get outside of the grind of work and things like that. So I think we're going to see travel and entertainment and dining and gaming and everything else just continue to be a way for people to enjoy themselves and to, enjoy all that hard work. And so I think we're going to see a lot of growth. And I think folks have been able to, work from home. Some people have been able to work from home. Well, those people will then be able to have more time to get out and enjoy life as well. So I think I'm a big believer. And as you know, I've got businesses in Hawaii, and I see things there continuing to be a positive. And I think that same thing will happen in great areas like Southern California and other places as well.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I really enjoyed the comment you made that today is the good old days, right? I think that's really impactful, because, sometimes you really have to stop and just, take in the moment, take in everything that's happening, and know that it may not be there tomorrow. So enjoy it, because these are the best times, so that's really good. I'm glad to hear you say that. One of the questions that is really, I think it's an interesting topic, and I know one that we've discussed and a lot that I've had conversations with other people are, do you believe that entrepreneurs are born as entrepreneurs, or can people become an entrepreneur?
I believe more people will become entrepreneurs than are born. And I think sometimes the born entrepreneurs, and I think I alluded to that, maybe I feel myself was that kind of fit into that category. I think sometimes we get stuck in our own way, where I think those who study it and see it, and really when you look at entrepreneurs solve problems. That's really what it is. And so whether it be solving problems for the masses, or solving problems for just a few individuals, or finding different things, they're not inventors either. I think one of the big confusing things is a lot of people think of entrepreneurs and inventors, and it's really not one and the same. Inventors make these great gadgets and things and everything else, but traditionally are not great entrepreneurs, because they don't know how to get it to the marketplace. They don't know how to service the customer. They don't know how to do all those other things. Entrepreneurs are problem solvers, and they're customer focused. And so those are both skills that you do not have to be born with. The biggest problem, or the biggest, I should say, hurdle for those who don't feel like maybe they have that entrepreneurial spirit, is how they put the risk to it. Like, it's going to be too risky. And so then you have to figure out, how do I weigh that risk out? How can I make this maybe a side hustle to begin with? Or how can I figure out, okay, instead of me going on my own, how can I work with a very entrepreneurial company that'll allow me to help them and help everyone else as I grow there?
That's some great information, Tommy, because I think you're right. You talk to people all the time, and they're like, well, I don't even know how to be an entrepreneur, right? And you nailed it. You said it's not inventing things. It's finding problems, solving the problems, and being customer focused, which, a lot of us that are in the workforce, that's what we do on a daily basis. We just do it in somewhat of a different environment, right?
Absolutely. And right. You see those folks that really do well in corporate environments or inside of companies are the ones that use that mindset already. They don't even realize they're using that mindset, but they've decided, I'm not going to just be an average person here. I'm going to figure out, hey, how can I do that extra step that really helps our customer? And that customer focus becomes the real, when I teach and I talk to students, and it's funny, I've taught, as I said, undergrad students, grad students, PhD students. So these are brilliant, brilliant minds. And when I talk to them, it's just focus on the customer, focus on that customer, and then start making the adjustments that can really allow you to create that opportunity for yourself or for the organization you're in.
That's perfect. That's perfect. What about what are some additional? So I know we've talked a lot about focusing on the customers. Sometimes I think we all are we have blinders on, right? We get into our current environment, we have blinders on, and we just go, we go. How would you suggest that somebody gets out of their box?
Yeah, that's such a great, and we all do it, Brandon. You're 100% right. Trust me, for me to say, oh, that never happens to me or whatever would be just ridiculous. We all get in that kind of routine, which also can become a rut and things like that. And so it's deciding, it's realizing, how can I be a little bit more curious? How can I add a little more curiosity? So one of the things that, even driving to work, hey, there's probably 10 different ways you can drive to work. What's the way today I drive a little bit differently, look at things a little bit differently, maybe go out of my way to, talk to someone I hadn't talked to, hey, if I've got a break today, let me spend a couple minutes talking to that person. The other thing is, get rid of your phones, get rid of your personal devices. I don't mean that literally, obviously, but what I do mean is, you see it now where you're in a situation and someone's, people are at lunch and they're just on their phone instead of talking to others. So part of that is just getting that curiosity and then also asking questions. I mean, that's one of the cool things with, if you're meeting someone that you're doing work with, maybe a partner, maybe someone who's a vendor for the company, it may be a customer, getting to know a little bit more about them, what makes them tick and why are they doing what they're doing. And that allows you that opportunity to see if there's some synergies around, hey, changing some things. Maybe they have some ideas you've never thought about. So it's those sorts of things. So I think it's being a people person and being curious.
That's great. When you sit back and you think about that is, you say put down your devices, because you do. I can tell you many lunches or dinners, and it's, you're talking to somebody and they're just on their phone. So it's like that conversation, what's really happening, and I think having those interactions, human interaction or different perspectives, it really does allow you to be a little bit more innovative. Maybe something just catches and you're like, oh, I got an idea, and you just run with it from there.
Well, then you can talk with people too, right? So instead of having an idea, hey, this may be crazy. Let's talk about it. It gives you that opportunity. But yeah, we've all been in those situations where you go into a room and everyone's on their device or whatever. Right. And it just, again, I think there's time of day that you need to probably be on your device and things like that. Certainly, technology has allowed us to have this meeting today, which is fantastic. It's allowed a lot of things to run smoother. We're seeing that a lot with, people paying for, checks and checking out of hotels. I mean, a lot of that's has really been great. So there's no negative to that whatsoever. But if you're finding yourself spending 3-4 hours a day playing games or checking emails or on social media, that's hours you can really be adding a lot of value to your life that will be much more meaningful.
Got it. Earlier you touched on risk very briefly, so I'm gonna come back to risk just a little bit. Being whether you're an entrepreneur, and you're looking at different things, and you're looking at risk. How do you deal with the perceived risk of whatever it is you have the possibility of running into?
Yeah, right. Because everyone has a different risk tolerance, right? So again, It's very hard to say. We see those folks who are, whether you call them daredevils, doing crazy feats and why they would be willing to do it. I think of some of those great free climbers who are, you watch some of those movies and things, you see these folks climbing thousands of the feet of the air with no ropes. You're like, how could I ever do that? And trust me, I could never do it. That's 100%. But at the same time, I think people look at entrepreneurs and have that same feeling that I have when I see that mountaineer or whatever climbing up the thing, like, oh, I could never do it. It's way too risky. So first of all, it's acceptable loss. So one of the things I really like to talk about is what's acceptable loss. And so it may be a financial matter, it may be a time matter, it may be reputation matter? And I'm not really saying you're putting up your reputation, but some people feel like, well, if I don't do this well, people are going to think different of me. That's what I'm talking about. It's not you're really going to hurt your reputation. It's more what you believe others will feel. In certain countries and certain things, the risk of failure is so great that very few people will become entrepreneurs. The great thing about here in the United States is no one really cares if you fail. We love failure. So there is no real care whether you try something and fail. And what we find a lot, and this is through studies and things like that, those folks who do small things and fail eventually fail up to success. They eventually fail up. So a lot of those early, and I use the word failure very loosely. Let's just say stumble. Fail is not the right word. The fail is to not be able to continue to move forward. So risk is very, very different. One of the big misconceptions in entrepreneurship, is really this idea of it takes a lot of money. And Brandon, we've talked about in class that rarely holds people back. Now, there's certain types of companies you cannot start without a lot of money, but that doesn't mean you can't be an entrepreneur. There's lots of service businesses that take very little money. There's lots of ways to test and do some side hustles that don't take a lot of money. So you can do a lot of things. You may not be able to create a car company without a lot of money or things like that. But there's, or pharmaceuticals is another one that takes time and money that really is, crazy. But there's a lot of other things you can do to start getting that success, having that feeling of solving problems for people, helping people, serving people, that then will allow you to grow to bigger companies down the road if that's what you so choose. Or you may say, boy, I'm in my place. I found my lane. I really like that. So risk is really, it's different for all of us, but it's being able to say, what am I really risking here? Great saying, if there's nothing to lose by trying, but a great deal to gain if successful, you try, and that's, I think, a great motto as you go forward in getting risk eliminated. That with what's your affordable risk?
Yeah. And I think try is very important as well, right? Because sometimes it's so easy just to say, maybe tomorrow, right? And then tomorrow gets getting put off and longer. So trying and failing, or we'll call it stumbling, I think is very important because, a lot of people, including myself, sometimes you look and you're like, I don't want to fail in front of everybody. I don't want to, stumble in front of everybody. But the reality of it is the more you stumble along the path, the better opportunity or the better chance you have of succeeding.
100%. And one of the worst words in entrepreneurship is mañana, using obviously the Spanish word for tomorrow, but putting that thing off for tomorrow is never the best way. The opposite is do it now. And so you just jump in and you do it now.
That's good information. Thank you. Thank you for that. So when you're working with people and you're going through some of these different classes to where you're teaching with people or people you've helped along the way, what are some skills or qualities that you have seen in people that you wish that you had?
Probably the list. We probably don't have enough time to get through all the things that I wish I had. But let me give you some skills that I think we all could improve upon, and some do it better than others. One, we'll just go back to where we just were left off with, Brandon. It's that tenacity to keep moving forward. It's that willingness to understand that I keep moving forward. And we see that in, all sorts of different things, but it's that not settling, not slowing down, learning. You got to learn, in other words, I think that's a very important trait. The same thing that happens is, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. So we have to, what we call, so one of the kind of buzzwords is pivot. I'll use the word adjust, which is just the same thing. But if we're doing something and we're not getting the result we want, how do we make kind of micro adjustments to get where we're at? Sometimes they may need to be bigger adjustments if we're totally away, but if we're not getting quite the same thing. So what are some of those adjustments that we'll want to make? So I don't think neither of these have to be entrepreneurial. I think these are just in life. When you're looking at folks who have had success in whatever they're doing, they're tenacious, they're constantly adjusting. And then I think it's that focus that you have to have. I think it's that focus. One of the things that I found very, very helpful to me and is where I write things down. And so sometimes you will say things. I may say, hey, Brandon, I'm going to do this. And, I see in a few weeks, you go, hey, Tommy, how'd that go? well, I didn't really say I was going to do that, did I? I said I was going to, do so, and so, but when I write it down, now it's a contract with me, and I've got it right there on paper. Now, maybe you want to do it electronically or whatever. I'm still old school, so I'll write it with pen and paper. But what I find is when I write it down, it goes to my subconscious, and now that becomes a priority for me. So things that I may not even look at, I'll go back. So I think being tenacious, being able to adjust and pivot, because realizing that there is no straight line in anything we want to accomplish. It's never a straight line. And so it's adjusting and pivoting, and then making sure we know exactly what that is that we want. And so what's that goal? What's that thing we want to accomplish? And writing that down. And I think those are some skills that I've seen really successful folks use to get the results that they want to get. And when we talk about results, again, the results for those individuals of what they want to do. So maybe, hey, how do I have a better relationship with my family? What are some things, how does that look like? Okay, well, maybe I need to approach my discussion with folks in a different way, or things like that. I mean, that's the one thing about it, is it's a lot of what we're talking about can go across a lot of different things, whether it's work, whether it's family, because all of it has to balance. If that's not all balancing, you're not going to you can't have one without the other. Now, trust me, people do, but that's where we see things, not a fulfilled life that we want folks to have.
You just gave some really great points. The tenacity piece. I mean, I think that's instrumental in everything that we do, right? Whether you're in the corporate structure or you're in the entrepreneurial world. So that hits everybody. Learn, right? I mean, you can never stop learning. I mean, the world is ever evolving. So much is changing in all these industries, and you have to constantly learn, or you'll get left behind. Focus, writing things down. I started keeping a journal back probably about 2.5 years ago, and that was probably the most instrumental thing I did, because I have so many conversations and talk about doing so many things, but at the end of the day, those were just thoughts and they've disappeared. But when you go back and you look at what you've done and things that you want to accomplish, it's amazing what you see and how you've evolved even over the course of time. So very, very good points. And then the last
Brandon,
one,
let me jump in. Sorry, just to ask a question.
Yeah.
Because on your journaling, which I think is so great, how do you take time to then to celebrate some of those little wins? Because I think that's important too.
Yeah, celebration is really the great part. I'll keep track over a monthly period, right? So I'll go through all my weeks and I'll keep track daily of things that I'm doing or tasks that I need to accomplish. And at the end of the month, I'll look at them. I'm like, where does this tie into my overall goals, to my crystal clear focus picture that you just touched on? And then I'll do little things. Maybe it might be a date night out to a special restaurant, or it might be, a weekend that we'll go to the beach and I'll go surfing. Right. Just little things like that, just to kind of keep my encouragement up to say, hey, you do better next time. You're going to go do this again. So I find things that I like to do or that I like to do with my family, and we go do those types of things. And we talk about why we're there. So we kind of carry that on with our kids as well.
Yeah, we have to celebrate those moments for sure. So I'm thanks for sharing that, because I want to make sure that people understand. Pat yourself. It's okay to pat yourself on the back. It's okay to give yourself that little reward, and I think that is that encouragement we need to give ourselves. So that's great to hear for sure.
Awesome, thank you. All right, next question for you, Tommy, and I think this is a pretty good one. What is your thought on mentors?
No one does it alone. So let me say that right away. No one does it alone, and I've talked about this, and I'm giggling because I don't know that I've had so many mentors in my life, but I don't know that I've ever said to one of them, will you please be my mentor? Right. If we look at some, those, it's not dating or whatever else. It's people that you bring along the way. And I've had mentors, and a lot of mentors are traditionally going to be someone that is a bit older than you, because they've just been down the road further. They've seen more things. They've had some experiences, and they can share that. And so that can be good. But I've also had mentors who are younger, and they may be just real experts. And I've used mentors in everything I do, whether it be for my, again, for my family. So folks who've been married longer than I have, and to understand how that works. And now I'm able to pass a little bit of that along as someone who's been married 35 years that, okay, here's some things that have worked. Again, not every day is, rainbows and unicorns over at the Knapp household, but we understand that we're doing our best, and we understand that at the end of the game, that's what's right for us, and that's how we can best serve not only ourselves, but our community by being married and staying married. But I think the idea with mentorship is critical. And so I think it kind of melts into that relationships. Again, if you go back to something probably most of our parents told us, hey, who you hang out is a reflection of who you are. Well, that's the same thing we want to have right now. So who we're hanging out with. But I always tell people to stretch for those mentors. Go reach out to someone, that maybe you aren't that close with, that maybe you go, well, that person, is a little bit, better, more well-known or a little bit higher up in the company or whatever it is. That's okay. Go reach out to them and just say, hey, do you have 10 minutes to talk? And sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't work. There's still going to be that human connection. You still got to be able to make that human connection. But I think mentors for everything in life. I've been very involved in sports. And so I had I decided about 15 or 20 years ago, I guess 20 years ago, I was going to get very heavily involved in triathlon. And so to cut to the chase, I became the 2004 and 2005 world champion in triathlon in my division because I'm missing my left arm. So I was at the one-arm world champion in triathlon. But the only way I got there was I found these two incredible women who became my training partners. And one ended up becoming an Olympian. So I just kind of, fell into that track. And the other was just a super successful, someone who I'd known in business. And so someone who I'd known in business didn't even know that. But they got me to be successful. I would not have been able to do that by training harder or everything else. They really helped.
So let me ask you, because this could be tricky for some people, right? And ultimately we're trying to find ways to help people become better at whatever it is they're doing. So one of the examples you gave to find a mentor is just to reach out and ask for a 10-minute conversation. What should that conversation be like?
That's a great question. So you've got to reach out. One of the things I always try to suggest to people is you reach out, and of course everyone goes, "Oh, I'm so busy and everything else." And so one of it maybe, well, where do you have coffee in the morning or whatever, and then find out, hey, what do you like? I will have your coffee ready for you. So in other words, oh, you like a cafe macchiato, whatever, with 20
right.
different shots or whatever it is. Great, I'll get you one of those, and you have it ready. And then you would say, hey, here's why. So you would just be honest with him and say, hey, here's why I chose you. I wanted to get to know you because I really respect this. And it may be their position in the company. It may be their relationship with their family. It may be, whatever it may be. And my goal is to figure out how I can, head in that direction, not become that person. Your goal is not to become that person. Trust me, no one wants to become me. I promise you that it's how can I head in that direction? And then let them talk. Remember, if you let people talk, they really like you because they got to talk a lot, so let them talk a little bit.
Perfect. Who did you use along your path? Did you who was one of your main mentors or, people that you really looked up to and admired throughout your course of time?
So early on when I started my first company, my first real official company at 20 years old. And so I was fortunate that I got to meet some people. I was in what was called the surfwear industry or action sports industry and apparel and clothing in that industry. And so through a friend of my dad's, a guy named Bunny Gillette, who went to Redlands, University of Redlands, he knew the guy who had started the Hobie stores. And he goes, Tommy, we're going to take you out to see my buddy, Dickie Metz, and everything. And so you got to start working on network. And I went and I met Dick Metz, and Dick Metz to this day, he's in his 90s, has been a mentor and a friend all the way through. So that was one, so it was a little bit of that warm introduction. If you can get that warm introduction, that was great. I remember there was a company that probably a lot of the folks here know called Quicksilver, which is, been around forever, started in the 70s in Australia. But the main thing was it was brought in 77 to the United States by a guy named Bob McKnight. And I had known of Bob McKnight, but I didn't really know him. And I was at a trade show or a different event, an industry event. This happened to be a trade show. And I just went up and I'd done my homework. I'd done my research. I knew he had gone to USC. And I said, oh, I went, and so I started to hit in all our connections. Well, Bob became and to this day is a good friend of mine. And so it's, you just have to, but I'm bold, man. I'm bold. Yeah. And you got to be bold. So I'm bold.
Yeah, no, that's a good piece of information as well, or advice really, because sometimes I think people will get so, I'll call it starstruck, or not even really know what to say or how to do it. But really it's just introducing yourself, hi, I'm Brandon Jones, and, start the conversation. And that's all it takes a lot of times.
100%. And Brandon, you're exactly right. It's so if you can do your little homework a little bit, so you know a little bit, so you've got a few things you can kind of jump out with the conversation. And then I think it's also, so what if they go, Guy, nice to meet you, and walk away? What was the negative? There was none. You didn't know him. You now still don't know him. But if by any chance they talk to you, now you know him.
Right. And one other thing that I want to talk about, you touched briefly on it just a second ago. But one of the things that you've really explained to us or talked to us about was don't keep everything a secret about yourself, about what you're trying or wanting to do. Tell everybody.
It's a concept that people really struggle to understand. And you're exactly right, Brandon. We've talked about this in class. People have their idea and they're like, oh, I'm going to keep this idea really close to myself because it's so good. When I do it, it's going to be great. And the real answer is you need everyone to know about. It's all about executing on that idea. Ideas are worthless. Now, yes. I'm going to say that again. Ideas are worthless. It's action put to those ideas that equals execution where the value comes into play. And so the more you talk about it, the more you can make adjustments. So when you are executing, you can have success with that. And so and it's also fun conversation for people. So now they go, oh yeah, I remember Brandon. He was the guy that, was working on this project. And so now when they go back and when you follow up either via email or a nice handwritten note or whatever, hey, remember I'm Tommy, the guy who's doing the shorts, or whatever it may be. So those are things, and it's all those little follow-ups that go along the way that are so important too. It's those touch points. That's how you build that relationship to it. So it's not just meeting them that one time. It's then following up with a thank you note. And then today, if that's a handwritten note that comes in the mail, people don't go get those anymore. So boy, that now makes you memorable. And then if there's, sometimes I'll do this, I'll see an article or something. And so I'll send a text to someone. I'll say, hey, I saw this article. I was thinking about you. We were talking about this. And you just keep building those touch points.
That's perfect. And you just led me to my next question because you touched on success, right? What is success to you?
I love this question, man. I love this question. Success is happiness. Success is adding value to others. Success is taking care of my family. Believe it or not, and you notice I didn't put the word money in there. Now, yeah. I'm not dumb enough to think that life doesn't revolve around money. I mean, I understand, hey, we got to put food on our tables, gas in our cars, we got to drive our cars, all those things, and that requires money. But once you get to a point where you're able to make sure that you satisfy those needs, that's not success. That's really not success. Success is the impact you have. Success is that way you take part in your community. So it's so many other things. One of my favorite successful people is my sister, who was a school teacher and now runs a school. And the amount of impact she has in her community at her school is way bigger than I've seen plenty of folks with millions and millions of dollars have. And so I think we want to be careful. Success really has to be individually defined.
I'm happy to hear you say that, because I think over time, and even as people, initially when we're starting out, where you think it's got to be all about the money, right? It's all about the money. It's all about the fame. It's all about whatever it is. But in reality, once we kind of evolve and we get ourselves in a good place where we can take care of our families, it really is about lending a helping hand, right? Helping people get to their next place, finding that happiness and just adding value to others. So it's really nice to hear you say that.
I think, especially with your crew here, I think what a lot of them, it's really hard because they're like, hey, I'm still struggling to maybe get every dollar to make it through and take care of everyone and make sure my children are, get those extra perks that I want them to have and all the things that happen. And so I know it sounds funny, but I promise you, the more you give to others of yourself, of your time and else, that dollar is going to come somehow naturally. The more you give and figure that out, you're going to find the way beyond that dollar. And that's where the impact really happens. I understand it sounds stupid because I'm sitting here saying that. And so for some folks, that may be a struggle. But I promise you, my advice is figure out how you can give more to the folks that you're working with, give more to the folks in your community. And you'll find that you'll stop chasing money. Money will be finding you.
Well, that's interesting. And I'm just going to touch on this a little bit before I move to our next question. But, I feel very fortunate to be in a place where I'm at right now here at Yamava Resort and Casino, working with the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, and our team that we have here, because everybody gives. Like, they really pour out to the employees, to everybody all the time, and it really does set an example, right? You see everybody giving so much that you almost like, well, I need to give more. You know, how can I give more to other people? And it really is, it's the whole rising ship method, to where you keep giving and giving and everybody just rises. So it's a pretty neat experience to be involved in. And I think if more and more people could just help others, you know, we're all going to rise, and we're all going to see good things happen, and we're all going to be happy and successful, regardless of what it is that we decide to do.
Absolutely. And success is going to look different. Some people are going to feel the success where they're at, but they're going to be yearning for something else. And that's okay too. And that's where then they need to make that impact. And you see those folks, whether it be folks in, you know, people's different churches or different faith organizations, or you see those folks on, you know, clubs or teams, and those people are just doing phenomenal work. And it's very selfless, you know, and I think it's cool to see, and that's where opportunity for success comes.
That's perfect. So we talked a little bit ago about how, you know, the reason why you got into teaching and the reason why that you're a professor now, and to share some of those lessons. You know, but one of the questions I have is there any other reason? I mean, you have so many things that you're involved in. I pulled your resume, Tommy, from here, and you're involved in so much, and you have so much going on. Why do you take the time out to give back to the students?
Unfortunately, what we were just talking about being selfless, I'll say it's, for me, it's being selfish, because I get so much out of it. And so I know that sounds funny, but I think that's part of where I realize is I'm having a good time, and you know, and you get to see me in class, and I'm not sure every professor is having as much fun as I'm having. But there's a big reward for me when I can see a student take that next step, where they, instead of it being a classroom project, they're launching a venture or doing something. You know, this last few weeks, I've been talking to some of my previous students who are, you know, doing different things. Some in security, Brandon, you got to meet Ty Smith, you know, and he and I have been talking the last couple of weeks about him getting to that next level. There's a real coolness to that, where you can now see some of your little impact is making on other folks. And so I think that's what I have. I would guess it's the same for coaches that you see with different teams, where they feel that they can do things like that. But it's really, it's getting out of what you normally do. It's getting out of your comfort zone. The other thing that, and my wife and I laugh about it, because a lot of times when you're working, you know, your tail off, like a lot of us are, and doing, no one's telling you thank you every day. No one's saying, but I'll tell you, students actually say thank you. And so that's kind of a cool thing too. So I will say that when you get a nice thank you, that's kind of a positive thing for sure.
Of course. And I know many people thank you. It's, you know, being in your class is amazing. No, I mean, I know I got you here in front of me, but literally I'm like, I tell people all the time, I'm on the edge of my seat. Like, when he starts talking, or we're doing things, like, I'm taking notes, I'm writing stuff down, I'm trying to comprehend it all, because you don't get that everywhere. Right. And you bring a certain level of energy to the environment. It's like you want to listen, because you're afraid you're going to miss something. So yeah, thank you for being that way and delivering for all of us there.
Well, thank you.
I'm going to move into some fun questions now. Okay. So
these have been fun questions. I bet go right ahead.
No, you're right. You're right. They have been great questions. But now if you know now, or let me start all over. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you provide your younger self starting a career?
You know, it's probably a little bit repetitive of things that we've talked about, but it would really be put others first. Put others first. Put that customer first. And if you're laser focused on making sure that customer has a great experience, you know, whether it's buying something, whether it's, you know, receiving, you know, being part of something, but making sure, because if they're having a great experience, they're going to tell others and others and others, which will allow you, with whatever venture or whatever company you're working for, do really well. And then this is going to sound crazy, but also believe in yourself, believe in your gut, believe in that things, and then just follow through on it. The other thing I've said before, and someone asked me, you know, kind of in that same thing, I'd say get up. And what I mean by that is we all fall down. We talked about stumble, fail, whatever you want to say. Trust me, the only person who really cares is yourself. No one else is looking at you. No one else is trying to do it. Maybe your mom cares, which is great. Hopefully your mom does. That's their job. It's supposed to be, what they do. But beyond that, just get on up because no one cares. Get up, brush yourself off. If you've got some friends, ask them to help brush you off a little bit and then just keep going forward.
What is your favorite quote?
I don't know what probably something from the original Rocky movie, but in all honesty, it would be, I was thinking about it this week. It's, if you want me to do an hour speech, I'm ready to go right now. But if you want me to give you a 5-minute speech, I'm going to need a couple days. And so it's that idea around editing that we realize that all of us can talk for hours, but how do we edit to get the best thing? So I would say if we all can figure out, keep things simple when we're doing things, I think that's helpful.
Perfect. Do you have a favorite book that you've read?
I was just, someone had asked me that, and Brandon, I think we've talked about this in class. I'm going to give everyone permission. If you use Audible or any other listening, you can call that a read. Now, my wife will disagree with you, but I'm giving you all that permission because I literally have probably done 70 or 80 books just this year via Audible because it just is, it's so nice. You can go out for a hike in your car, whatever, and you can get a lot of things. And I just re-listened to one I'd actually read years ago. And it's a book that really would encompass, and so it's written by Bob Berg, and I'm probably stealing a little bit of his thunder in what we've talked about, but it's called The Go-Giver. And it's really this idea of how we give of ourselves and give to others to actually have the greatest success. And so I think it's good. It can be applied to lots of things. So I'll throw that one out there.
Perfect. Well, that'll be my next download then, because I too have listened to a ton of audibles.
I get nothing from Audible, but I'm telling you, it's a great service for sure.
Yeah. Perfect. Is there a book that you would suggest to others to read?
Well, Brandon, you all just read this in class. You tell me what you think of it. But Shoe Dog, I think, is a great for anyone interested in, how to start a company, and it's written by the great Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. What do you think? What did you think of that?
That was a great book. There's a lot of lessons in there. And what's interesting is it's not one that you just read a couple pages and then you'll put away and then you'll pick it up, a month down the road. Like once you're in it, you're cutting through it. You're reading it because there's always something that's coming up next. So there was a lot of lessons in that book.
Yeah, I think for folks that have that, hey, maybe someday I'd like to start something or do something. I want to understand how this did. The great thing is, about that book is it doesn't tell you about Nike today. We all know Nike today. I mean, it's what, the largest apparel shoe company, but it really talks about those early days of Phil Knight grinding to sell a few pairs of shoes. And I think we all lose sight of the grind that those entrepreneurs had in those early days.
Well, and you called it out earlier. You said it doesn't take a ton of money to start a business, right? And that's evident in that book. You pick up on that from day one, page one of that book, and kind of how that started, and hiding the shoe boxes under his bed as his warehouse, So there's a lot there, a lot of great lessons.
Yeah, and he was doing my favorite thing, the side hustle. And right. Get that side hustle going to test things out. That eliminates a lot of risk.
Right. All right. Hobbies. What's a good hobby of yours?
Most of my hobbies revolve around something real active. So love to spend time at the ocean, and I'm blessed to be able to do that. I swim, I paddleboard, I surf, do a lot of hiking. So I love to hike. As I said, I was also a triathlete, so I still do a lot of road and mountain biking, road cycling and mountain biking. And then unfortunately eating, and I eat way too much, but that's another one. But that's why I try to do all those other things. So
I'm a bit of a foodie myself, so we'll have to find some good restaurants sometime and go check them out.
Oh, yeah, I always love a good restaurant. That's for sure.
Perfect. Is there any subject that you'd like to completely nerd out on?
It's probably, that's a good question. I'm not a tech guy at all, so that doesn't work that well for me. It probably is entrepreneurship. I mean, it sounds stupid, but it's probably talking business with people. I mean, I mean, you and I could talk for hours on business because I just love it so much, and talking about ideas. And I'm that, and The other thing and drives my wife crazy is I'll ask, someone on the street just dumb questions because I get so excited. So I would say people in entrepreneurship.
Perfect. How can people, if they have more questions for you or would like to have further discussions with you, are you usually open to that?
I am, it just is tough. I always put my students first. So I always put my students first. And so it comes, but people can always reach out to me at tnapp@usc.edu.
Okay.
And if you all need to post it. And then, and hopefully for some of the folks here, I'll be able to come back in February and meet folks and talk to them at that time as well. So
that's going to be great. I know everybody's going to be extremely excited to have you out and to hear everything that you have to say. So my last question for you, Tommy, and this is one question that we always ask everybody, is what are 3 tips that you have that you could give to others in order to take their career to the next level?
Okay, I'm going to do my best here. Number 1 is have a routine. So we all do best when we have a routine. So get your routine dialed in. And that routine should start with getting to work early. Whatever that job is, whether it's your own company or whether it's working for someone else, be that person that if, be there a little bit early, be there ready, take that time to get really ready to go would be number 1. Number 2 is put that customer first, man. Always look at how can we best serve that customer. Now be careful because you get in a large organization and you can't always take the lead of just jumping in, but start talking to others on your team and say, hey, I'm not sure we're doing the best thing here. How can we do it better? What are some ways we can better serve that customer? So I think if you're customer focused, you're doing it on a routine, and then you're always making sure that success doesn't come without team success. Understanding that there is no individual success without team success. And so whether it be in a real team or in a sport or in, your family, in other words, there's no great individual family. That's an individual. You want success, it's got to be the team, it's got to be the family. So I think those are 3 key things that all of us can do, and we can all do better. We all, and when we fall off a little bit, just refocus in, get back on the foundation and focus back in.
Perfect. Thank you, Tommy, so much. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to be able to sit down and speak with you for the last hour and just have a conversation and talk about a lot of different topics. I think this is all going to be very beneficial to everybody that listens. So thank you for your time. We look forward to having more of these conversations, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. My pleasure, and really enjoyed being with you. And I can't even believe it. It just went by so fast, but thanks for having me.
Thank you, Tommy. Have a good day.
Okay.
Check out more episodes on nextlevelcasinocareers.com.